Welcome to the final June edition of our morning coffee review. Of course, this is our every Tuesday morning live podcast to talk about all things Bluebeam review. And this is our community building hour, essentially. What we're after is just community engagement. Let's talk about Bluebeam. We're going to be using it today. We're going to be using it all week. What sort of things have come up and what sort of things are you looking forward to? In these sessions, if you haven't joined us before, we have a topic. So today's topic is basically, back to basics. We're going to talk about some of the things that maybe you wish you had known when you first started the software. We're going to go through some of those types of things. Of course, that's just a loose topic. If you have any questions at all about review or about what it can do, just type it in the chat or put it in the Q&A panel and we'll answer it. Sometimes this is fun for us too because we learn as we go. We'll test new things and we'll try it out, and that's the beauty of this community. We're just all trying to help each other out. So with that, I'm going to fire up review, and with that, once I get review fired up, I'll begin to share my
I'll go
screen.
First.
You're going to go first? Beat me to it?
Here we are.
Okay.
Gunslinger over here, fastest in the West. So.
Okay, you beat me to it. I was going to take it a step farther because I actually reset my review this morning.
Oh, okay.
To go
fine,
completely back to scratch.
There you go.
All right.
You can go first.
All right. So here's what I did. I opened up the Bluebeam Administrator this morning and I reset my software. No big deal because all my custom stuff is saved and backed up. But if I were brand new to review and it shows up on my computer, and this is what happens. This is what we hear from some of our customers is that I just showed up and there was this new software on my computer and I don't know what it is, or I didn't know how to use it. Where'd my Adobe go? You end up with review. And when you first open it, you might not think much of it. So that's what this session is kind of about. Like, what do you wish you knew when you first started using review? Or what does it do? What sort of settings should you change? So my review, I just opened up and it's essentially the first time. I reset it. So here we're going to see our end user or EULA, and you can do your automatic send to use data. No, thank you. And I'll hit I accept. When you first open review, you are greeted with these great tutorials, right? Or this little video, and there are tutorials built in, and there is a sample file. This sample file is a floor plan, and you'll probably see one of us demonstrate this more times than not because it's super handy and it can show you some of the things the software can do. So this is a bone stock install, essentially, of Bluebeam Review. And this is what always catches people off guard, your profile. Now, profiles are a huge part of review, and we've done other sessions about this in depth. So if you have any questions or curiosities about profiles, go hit our YouTube channel, and you can see some of the older stuff. But for the majority of the morning coffee review sessions that when you see me sharing my screen, I'm in the review advanced profile. And this is where a lot of people don't know what review can do, right? So if you change to the review advanced profile, you're going to see more buttons, start to give you a better idea of what the software can do. And the panels are organized a little better. That's my preference for that. Now we're in a bone stock review. I'm in the review advanced profile. I have my sample thing open. I'm going to flip this back over to Michael so he can share and you can see what he's done to his.
Okay. I think I'm in review as already. I switched mine. Nope, I'm in field issues. I think my reviews even changed as well, but let's talk about how we can modify how some of these look. So I'm going to go to review advanced. It's going to already populate my markups list, which can also be moved, by the way. Let me do this, participants. I wish I could see you. There you are. So I can always look at you. There we go. How can we modify the way this profile looks? So profiles contain a lot of items within review that are attached to it, essentially, like the tool sets or the markups list columns, and also where things are. So customizing your profile is a huge part of review and how you can navigate through it. It's a great way to set a company standard if you wanted everyone to be unified on where everything is, so you can help each other find things. It's also a great way to do different tasks, right? Like quantity takeoffs, punch walkthroughs, or just making markups, right? Doing some plan reviews,
Redlining
creating.
or
Yep,
preliminary line work. So much good stuff you can do.
exactly. And having a profile specific to the task is also a great idea, because then you have tool sets not overwhelming everything that you're in, because you have, I don't know, 20 different tool sets for every single job. And also the markups list in terms of how you're exporting your data or organizing your data can again be set up for the specific tasks that you're going to be utilizing it for. That way you're not taking up space, and also you're not having some of the same custom columns to grab some of the same data for different markups as you're going through. But again, to create a custom profile, you go to profiles here, you go to manage profiles. And again, you have the ability to go through and say add. This is also where you can export it. It is saved out as a .bpx file. You can attach it to PDFs. You can also email it if you wanted to, store it on your server, all of those items. Make sure when you are exporting it, you include some of the dependencies that are in there, because that are things that are attached to the profile itself. Again, I'm currently in Review Advanced. And how can we modify the way the UI looks? For those folks that are new to Review and really haven't seen it here today, there are toolbar menus. It's like a happy medium between an Office PDF viewer and CAD software, I like to say. It could be overwhelming at first, but it becomes more digestible than what it used to be. Review did a huge interface change from 2017 and below, and now 2018, it looks like this and above.
But if you get the Review iPad version, it still looks like 17, which always throws me off.
Where are things?
But what I like about the menu bar, and this is something that I bring up in every training session that I do, is that it's always consistent. So as we're jumping through these different profiles from Review Advanced to Field Issues or any custom one, the toolbar is always consistent. So regardless of what type of work you're doing, if there's something else you need, you can access it there accordingly.
Yep. But in order to customize your toolbars over here and the information associated to them, you can actually modify where they are, but they do stay in the user interface. That is just grabbing the drag bars, and you have the ability to drag it around the UI. For quicker access, wherever you go to click, for those of us folks that have always used computer-aided design software, we're used to going to the top. For everyone else, you can move them around, of course. You can also add specific types of commands to them. I did that the other day. If anyone remembers, I was going through, for those folks that come here very often, I was going through and attaching a tool set to this specific one. And that was easy just by going through your tool sets and pinning it. You just go through and you say, hey, I want to pin it. Great. Where do you want to pin it? And it will populate there. You can also modify the way these look and which commands are inside the toolbar just by right clicking and going to customize. And from here, you have the ability to go through and modify what is displaying in those specific toolbars. Like advanced, this is everything that is currently contained in advanced: flatten, cut content, erase content, add space, hyperlink, file attachment, format painter, right? That's this bar here. But if I wanted to add something to it, I could search through the different categories like all, and I can go through and grab one like account and add it to that toolbar here. And I can hit OK, and now it's added it to that direct toolbar. Again, customizing it the way you need it to work for yourself, or the task at hand, right? Whenever you move these around in the user interface, they do stay there. So if you close out a review and open it back up, they will be there. But I always recommend saving the profile. That way you make sure you have a go back to, and you're not modifying any profiles like out of the box or Review Advanced like I just did. I'm going to have to go back and do what Jason did at some point.
Use the Bluebeam Administrator. So right there in that menu, you see Administrator. If you have access to that, there is a button if you go to help, pull that down. There's a setting to reset your settings.
but I think they took it out of here, right? It's now in preferences, admin here.
Oh, look at that. I didn't know that one was there. That's nice. Yeah,
Yeah.
I just use the administrator and go down to help. But yeah, that'll do it too. But you brought up the preferences and stay there because there's a couple things in here that we might want to change when we're first opening review. And this is part of the theme of today's thing. What do you wish you knew when you first started review? And for me, inside of the preferences, things like the color scheme. Some people really like the light theme. Some people really like the dark theme. I like the dark theme myself, but I do work with folks who like the light theme. Can you click on the general option on the left and show folks where to change to a light theme? There we go. So if you change to light, watch your eyes, it's going to be brighter. So if you like a brighter interface, if this is more familiar and comfortable for you, you certainly have that option to change that. There's another setting on here, and all the settings that I prefer to change are here in the general section. We've got a dark theme.
Sorry,
and then,
my eyes.
Right? Also, the username. So right now we see the abbreviation of Michael's name. You can change that to anything you want. And this is important to change because this is going to tie to your markups that you make. And this is going to be what shows up in the markups list and when you participate in studio sessions and projects. So I like to put, Jason Artley and then ATG in parentheses. That way they know who did it. So there's all sorts of settings in there. Also,
ooh, good tip.
Go to grid and snap. And make sure you turn on snap to content, snap to markup. Those are two other ones that are in there. Now that name thing that Kyle mentioned, or Kyle Davis is our support extraordinaire, works in our Minneapolis office. Just had a new baby a couple weeks ago.
Congrats,
Kyle. Welcome to the world, little baby Davis. He mentioned that by default, the name that we saw there, so Mashave for Michael there, that's your Windows user profile default. So it's pulling that in, so you can change that. We got to that by going up to Review in the top left corner and choosing Preferences. I believe it's the second option down.
Or Control K for hotkey.
Ooh, look at that. Preferences. And then General will have most of the settings that you want to do.
And Doug had a great idea. If you have a dashboard, because you can set a PDF to open when you start up, you can set that dashboard to open.
Oh, that's a neat trick. That's a good tip, Doug. I like that one.
Yeah, I haven't used that one before. That's a great idea.
Yeah, especially for folks that are new, and especially for people who are on job sites, right? You don't want to waste time digging for things. You can force everybody to do this. Now that setting should stick because you can export those preferences, and through your profile, that should deploy to everybody, right?
I don't know. That's why that would be a question: is where are you storing your dashboard, right? Is it local drive? Because I'm guessing it's going to go to the address that is listed here.
Yeah, that could be a neat one. We'll test that sometime. All right. Also on these settings that you might want to change. So we did the grid and snap. Right here at the bottom, this one bugs me. The snap color. By default, it's black, and it's really hard to see sometimes. So I tend to make mine red or green, something that's bright and visible for me. That just comes from years of CAD use and being able to see my little pick boxes inside of AutoCAD or Civil 3D. So those are a couple settings you might want to change with your first starting review.
Another one was default scrolling, zoom for single page or continuous modes. Yep.
Great option there. So this is going to depend on what type of files you're interacting with, right? So if you're constantly working with large text documents, like maybe construction specs or Word docs or anything else like that, you might want to go to scrolling, right?
So single page mode is continuous, meaning that this is going to be your control button, right? So Single page mode is scrolling in and out. Continuous page mode is going to be going to multiple pages, and we'll show you how that works here in a second. Actually, to be honest, this is even the best way. If you didn't know, when you pin file access, you have the ability to open up the folder. So I can easily go to folders that I have sheets already set up for things like this.
Do that again in slow motion.
Okay.
You better explain that because
Am I
that's
too
pretty
quick?
cool. And
Everyone's
this is another beginner-friendly tip that we want to show with pinning things from the file access. So in the Review Advanced profile, you have your file access panel. He's going to pull that up, and then what are you doing?
So instead of going file, open, and whatever this defaulted me to, right? I just know that I have sheets in a folder that lives in this area. So if you can, I can't move my mouse over there, but you look over on the right, the folder structure is Bluebeam, Review, Exercise Document, Sheets. I want to go to the Exercise Documents folders, right? That's where everything lives. So when I pin these, they pin in their native folder, and it allows me to click on that folder itself. So I pinned the document, which allows me just to see the document. Well, what if I had multiple documents in Sheets folder that I wanted to get access to as well? All I have to do is click the folder, and it brings open the folder, and I wanted to jump back to Exercise Documents and go to Specifications here. So that's what I did.
Very nice. Side note, we got a question from Bob. Will you email a link to this recording? I have to go. Plus, I need to review REVU this later. So bonus points for the great pun there, Bob. This and all of our other, or this session and all of our other sessions are on our YouTube channel. So you can always go back. If we're talking about profiles or dashboards and you're like, what the heck does that mean? Go check out our other sessions. You'll find out some information there.
Yep, and you can go through and say, Michael was clicking too fast, so I need to pause or reduce the speed to like 0.5 or whatever. You can.
Our YouTube channel. We'll put that in the chat. DJ CJ.
Yep. DJ CJ
she'll take care of that for us.
Behind the scenes navigator.
Yep. The backbone of this operation, really.
Yeah. So continuous page mode is that. So it's seeing as I'm opening up the PDF, the file size over here. And if you don't see this file size, you may not have your navigation bar. So if you don't see any of this bar, and I've had clients ask, hey, I can't find where it went. Maybe they were typing too quick on their keyboard and they pressed a button and they didn't realize that something went away. That is up under Tools menu, Toolbars, and that is our navigation bar. So if they hit F4, it goes away. If they hit F4 again, it brings it back up. And again, it shows you the document size over here. So does my, I forget the name of this one. Hold on right here. The status bar, F8, shows you the size as well, but you can pick between the both. This again is a smaller document. It's an 8.5 by 11, and Review knows it's a smaller document, so it's going to give you what we call continuous page mode, allowing me to scroll in with my scroll wheel down the pages, right? You can change this by holding Control. As you see my hand, it shows a hand as my mouse icon with an up and down arrow. As I hold Control, it's going to change to a magnifying glass, which then I can scroll in and out. And that is what we call single page mode. I release it again, I can scroll down the page. Now you can easily change this if you have, again, the navigation bar open. It's right here, one full page or scrolling pages. That can also, like Jason was saying, this never changes up here, my menu bar. I can go back up and go to View, and I can change between the two right here, single page, continuous page mode, or Control 4, or Control +5.
So all different types of navigation, depending on what types of files you're interacting with. You know, I don't want to scroll through an architectural set of plans. I'd rather do the zoom in.
Yep. All righty. So there was a question up at the top. Do you want to read the Q&As while we
Yep,
go
I'll
through?
read the question for you. So question there. Will you cover the Bluebeam administrator to adjust where Bluebeam prints to and not just prompt for file name? It's always an option that I have to change because I print a ton of files at one time and I don't want to have to sit there and click something to get through all the file names. This is a great question because this is also something that ties into the beginner experience with review. You know, even though I pitch review as a paper replacement, right? Let's work on these paperless workflows. We still need to print. And sometimes that's to other PDFs or it is to print to paper. So inside of the Bluebeam administrator is where we can set some of those settings for where our prints are going to go.
So not here.
Or there, wherever.
We'll go here.
So this is one of those things, talk to your IT folks because this should be part of the deployment.
So you can see mine?
Yep.
Okay.
So right there, so the question was, you can toggle off the not prompt for a file name. And that's on the printer tab. Prompt for file name. You can turn that off. And you can adjust, your default printers. You can adjust default sizes. You can reinstall. You can manage things. There's a bunch of settings in here. So if you're doing a lot of printing through review, you might want to take a look at this. And again, these are settings that can be deployed if you have more of an IT oversight at your firm.
Yeah, Abe, that sounds like a Windows issue with F10 up down through your keyboard and how the application is understanding the F up and up, F down, depending on what type of keyboard structure you have. Because if it is F10, that is a different command versus like my keyboard that has like its own keys for it, right?
Yep.
You can't really, I can't really see mine. Can't bring it up. Sorry.
So yeah, the question was, on that computer when you're trying to hit page up or page down, which is F10 or F11, which my keyboard doesn't have either. So I have F10, F11. So that's probably a Windows or a keyboard setting. Kyle, if you're still around, can you clarify
I think you
that?
have to hold Shift in order to use the up down instead of the F10. It's either Shift or Control. I forget which it is. Because then it allows you to press the command of going up versus the F10 because it's two commands in a button. But I think it's Control or Shift that allows you to control which command you're doing in that button.
Right. Good stuff. All right. Back to basics. So when you first start using the software, we've gone through some of the preferences. We've gone through pinning files and looking at panels. Let's talk about panels. What are those? What are they? How come you only have 5 on the one side and 6 on the other? Are there more that aren't shown?
Yes. So panels are great user interfaces that allow you to do multiple things within it. Like file access. The question first, though, was if I don't want to go off tangent, when Jason asked me a question, is there more? So you can right click in an open area on your panel and you can say show. So I am missing links and forms. There's some hidden ones down here that can also be moved from this location. So if you wanted them not to be docked down here or some other ones to be docked down here, like Studio should only open up from my drop-down menu of these toolbars down here, because this is just a docking station location-wise. But again, you have the ability to populate more panels. And as we can see here, we have bookmarks, which allows us to easily navigate through bookmarks like a bookmark in a book. That's my best analogy there. If you have a better one, Jason.
Nope. I can't beat that.
And then you have file access, which is just like your old filing system, which ironically enough, we finally retired ours and put everything into a paperless workflow at my household. Or you have the flags. So you can go through and flag specific items on the document like hyperlinks. You also have forms, which we went over last week, which I highly suggest everyone going through. I learned some new things. Jason learned some new things. I think everyone learned some new things. JavaScripting console, and I don't remember if this is you have to have Extreme or not for the JavaScripting console at least. I unfortunately have Extreme, so that would be a question that I don't know the answer to.
Well,
we have-
back up. Not unfortunate that you have Extreme. You have Extreme, so you're going to see buttons in here that maybe other folks don't, and we'll talk about that after this. So JavaScript, I think, is an Extreme only.
Yes. And then layers. So layers are items that, well, I guess great analogy since I already did this the other day to help explain a workflow for a client. You can export and import comments into review. So unlike other softwares where you have to use Control-C, Control-V, and then have to replace them, you can easily do it by one click of a button, going through down here in the markups list, hitting the drop down and selecting export. But the only thing is that it exports all of the markups, right? So a great way to limit what is exporting out of that is to put markups onto layers. And you can deselect the export feature from the layer itself. So if you only want markups that have the status of not completed, then you can go through and say, great, let me go in the markups list, assign them to a layer of not completed. Those are the ones I'm going to export out. David said the JavaScript console is available in standard. Great.
Thanks for clarifying.
So for all of those folks that have the language of JavaScript, they can go through and use the API and review and do some things. Then you have the markups list, which is down below, itemizing all of our information. You have measurements, which gives you more in-depth settings for the measurements that you are taking accurately on your document, or inaccurately if you're not using the point-to-point correctly. And then you have properties, which is almost like the dynamic options bar. That's what I like to call it because it's dynamic to whatever command you have selected. So if I go through and get ready to mark up a document here, you have this options bar here. I call it dynamic because it is dynamic. It changes every time you select a markup or a command. I guess it's a command that you're in. That's what I should say. But you also have settings that are there as well for anything that you are utilizing in review. You have the search feature, which allows you to visually search for something in a document or text search for something within a document. You have sets, which allows you to make a complete document set out of separate pages. You have signatures, which I believe most folks should know what signatures are. Spaces, which is great actually for bid punch walkthroughs, spaces itemizing per space. You can export rooms from Revit, the design environment, out as spaces into review. There's Studio, which a lot of folks also don't know, comes with unlimited storage for any file type. So for all of you Dropbox folks, you don't need to pay for Dropbox when you have free storage right here in Studio. That is Studio Projects, unlimited file size, anything in a standard FTP site can store. So Excel files, Revit files, UWGs,
CAD files, yeah.
CAD files, PDFs, dashboards. I prefer my dashboards to be in here. And then there's a second part to Studio, which is Sessions. And Sessions is live collaboration on 2D or 3D PDFs. You have thumbnails, which is great for modifying or editing documents. There's also the tool chest. So for those folks that are new to review, instead of reusing or thinking, how can I recreate these markups that I've used before? You can always keep them in a safe spot in your toolbox, just like you have your Allen key set. The one thing you don't have to worry about is not putting your tools back in your toolbox because they'll always be there unless you delete them. And then the 3D model tree is great for 3D PDFs. It allows you to itemize the data in the 3D PDF through the 3D model tree. It mimics the markups list, but for 3D PDFs.
And we talked about 3D PDFs when we did our CAD edition of our morning coffee review a couple weeks ago. Question here: can you show how you access that pop-up box with the various panels again? So clicking in the Review Advanced profile, which has the panels off to the side, you're right-clicking on an open area, and you went to Show. Is that available? I have to open up mine. Can you get to that same thing from the tools window? Panels. Yeah, you can also pull down the window pull down from the main menu. Go to panels, and then you can also select them there.
From tools?
From window. One over to the right. Window, panels. There we go. So that's what's cool about review. There's multiple ways to do the same thing, whether they be in the toolbar or in the panels, and depending on what profile you're in, you're going to see different options. But this is the old faithful here. That menu bar at the top will always be there to help you find those different things.
Yeah, and different from the toolbars, the panels, when you select them, they have different options within them themselves. I love to show this to Jason because he's always like, wait, what? So you don't actually need to go through and do File Explorer. You can go File Access. Instead of your recent files, you can explore your files here as well. So hitting a drop down in these menus of panels, they also have different options. So again, just like tool sets, I have drop downs here that allow me to see the tool sets in my tool chest. So these panels can be removed from the UI. So if you left click and hold or right click and say detach if you wanted to, it can be detached from the user interface. Yes, this can be docked on a second screen. So by default, it can be moved to a second screen. And then I can say reattach to the left if I wanted to. Same thing for my markups list that's itemizing all of my information. I can detach it. It wants to attach to the other screen, bam. And I can have this on the second screen if I need more real estate, right? So you have the ability to, sorry, go.
Great tip.
Yep. And you can again say reattach to the bottom, boom. Left click to hold to drag it to reorient the organization of where it's being placed. Again, then you can have these also docked next to each other. So if I left click hold to where this is, you can dock them within themselves, which to me is confusing because then I want more real estate more than anything ever when I'm using a command. But again, to each their own, it's completely up to you how you change this. And again, you can save it to the profile, right? So if we wanted to go through and save it to the profile, share it with our other colleagues, or it's specific for the job and task, you can save it to the profile as well. Are we having any questions?
Good tips. Nope, not yet. So with that, as we continue through here, please enter any questions in the chat or Q&A. Otherwise, we'll keep going. So you're showing the panels in that tool set brought up a question from me. And I think we should probably go through and talk about making a text box. Some of the defaults that you see, and one of the questions that we normally get when we're showing people review for the first time is like, how do I make my text a different color? I don't ever want to see red text. I only want to see blue. How can we change some of those defaults?
Yeah, so let's go through and talk about some of the great markups that review has to offer that are differentiators, right? Compare this to another software. So we'll go and say, here's a text. So as I go and click my text command, and for those of us that, I'm going to go to default because I'm going to guess most newer users don't know where that text is. So for me, it'll be easier to show and help you along versus more advanced users that know where the tools are. So from here, by default, you have the text over here on the right-hand side. This is where your default toolbar is. You can also go to tools, markups, and text, or T for the hotkey, which Jason and I unfortunately can't learn. But we'll go to here, I'll say text, and Jason was saying, great, you're gonna place a text box. I love to give everyone the little tip after I place this to say, we'll say morning coffee. I'm gonna, no, I was gonna say I was gonna spell something wrong here so that it shows spell check, but we'll change the color to blue, like Jason was saying. And be aware when I dragged this text box out, it stayed that size. And sometimes this is annoying, especially when you give it an outline shape, like Jason's gonna tell me to do next, right?
I wasn't gonna tell you that.
Because it goes the full size of, excuse me, of what your original text was, which isn't fun. Now, by default, it's this way. You can use the auto size text box feature, or Alt-Z for the hotkey for that. Or there's a preference you can set up under preferences here that actually allows you to, I believe it's under tools.
Yep.
You can auto size text box and call out markups. So you don't have to reuse that every time. Once you're done placing a text, it'll auto resize for you like this.
That's a perfect tip to show when we're talking about setting up review. That auto size text box makes just everything look nicer, and it saves you clicks. And that's what this software is all about. Let's save you clicks. Let's get you doing your job.
Yep.
And saving you time.
So I changed it to a square. I'm going to change that to blue. Now there's always this comment of, I always like to show people what they may be currently doing, which is text box, and they may even be doing it in this software, and that's no fault of their own. They're just didn't know there was more to review, right? They're using it like the other A word, we'll just say, the other software. From here, I can go through and select the arrow, which most users will go through and say that is how they're making their callouts, right? Which is okay, but not how we should be using review. So I'm going to delete that arrow. And what you can do, even from this text box, is select it, right click, and add a leader.
This is the add leader function is fairly newer, right? That came out in 20.
Yep. I don't know which edition. I don't like to be tied to things.
It's recent. So if you're on an older version, you're not going to see that add leader function. But if you were to use a call out instead of a text box, you get the same behavior.
Yep. And we'll move on to callouts. So there's a callout feature that has the text box already created with an arrow. And that is over here. It is Q for the hotkey or tools from markup to callout. So I can go through and say, great, where do you want to place your arrow? I'm going to do it on grid 6. Boom. Then I'm going to say, hello, all. And again, I have to use the hotkey Alt-Z.
A couple of things there that I want to point out. So when we first started going through the preferences, we set up, we clicked that option to snap to content or snap to markup. And then we changed the color of that snap. So when you saw Michael do that call out and he actually touched the letter or the number, so you see that little box that's showing up? That's actually connecting to that data. And that's a perfect place to segue to talk about different types of PDF files. So if you weren't aware, when you're in review, if you're dealing with a vector PDF versus a raster PDF, you're going to get different results. So Michael's going to open up some different things to let you see, and hopefully you've all seen this at some point in your career here. So he's opening up a vector on one side and a raster on another, and 90% of the time, no, vector's 100% of the time the way to go. But the difference that you're going to see is not only in how the quality of what you see on the screen, but how Bluebeam reacts. Snapping to that content is going to be a little different. So
are you going to cover it while I just move my screen, or you want me to talk about it?
You can talk about it while you got it going up there.
So great functionality about reviews. You can split screens. You can split screens up to 16 times. I've split my screen here. Review also has a sync function, so you can synchronize the views even when they're split and even when they're undocked. So for those of us that have used Google Chrome in the past, review interface actually works the same way for the PDF tabs. So I can left click and hold and drag it out if I wanted to. I can't reattach it because it already has one here, but I can move this back to a second screen or another screen. Now, if this was the only PDF of that version open, I could right click and say reattach, which I can't here, but I can come back and just split the screen again. Now it's synced. So as I move one screen, the other screen moves with it. As I zoom out, follows it. This is a great way to do plan reviews, right? There is an overlay feature in review that overlays them together so you can see the differences, but maybe you're just trying to use a visual method of going through and checking changes. This is another great way to do that because you can synchronize documents. And that leads us into vector versus raster PDFs. Now, vector PDFs actually have the metadata associated to all their PDFs. They're not seen as every single dot per inch, which is what you get with raster. The most common times you get a raster is because it's a scanned PDF. Now that doesn't mean you cannot from your design software print out a raster. You definitely can, but by default in your design software, it is vector. So it would be the intent of the designer to change it to a raster PDF. And that is particularly from my knowledge from Autodesk products, by default, it's vector. Other products, I don't have experience with those. But coming from here, again, majority of the time you're receiving a raster PDF is a scanned document. It's a single image on the PDF, whereas vector has the metadata of the document itself, which different viewports also have play into effect of how the speed of the document is working as well, because different writers have different coders. So that's, again, another thing of review. Hey, does Review's PDF writer, and can someone else open up my PDFs? Yes, Review follows the ISO standard, so the International Standard Organization for Coding PDFs. It follows the same standard. So if another software wasn't following that standard, you wouldn't even be able to open up that PDF in Review. Majority of them follow that, but they do code viewports differently, like GIFs or GIFs, which have larger file sizes. So I always recommend, if you're having rendering issues or some kind of issue with a PDF, you always go through and check who was the writer of that document. So Control D, and then from there you can see what was the PDF producer. If it wasn't Bluebeam, and my preferred method is to use Bluebeam's writer, you can go through here and you can always go to wherever your file was from File, Create from File, and rewrite it as a Bluebeam written PDF.
Good tip.
Okay, so keep me back on the straight and narrow there, Jason. Where am I at?
So yeah, we were just showing the difference between raster and vector. And as you saw when they were split screened, when you zoom in, the raster is going to show up all sort of pixelated. So when you see that pixelated PDF, you know it's going to be a little different. You're going to get different results. So you might not get the same snap functionality. Your measurements aren't going to be as accurate, so on and so forth. Now,
can I go through and make that a vector though?
I don't know, can you?
So you can use the optical character recognition to make text selectable, right? Because text isn't selectable in a raster PDF. It is seen as an image. Whereas vector, right, I have the ability to go through and select my text, snap to content. I can actually change this to snappable content with the optical character recognition. Now, caveat being, if it's handwritten notes, Review is not going to know how to understand that type font.
Or so if it's a funky font, like one of those old AutoCAD architectural fonts, and it's not going to work so well.
Yeah, so you still can run the OCR, and that is an extreme feature only. I recommend every firm at least having one version of Extreme so you can run the OCR if need be, and a bunch of other batch features as well.
Well, that's an even perfect segue to where I was going to talk about next. So you've talked about Extreme, and we've talked about Standard. What does that even mean? How do you know which one you're in now, and why would that be important?
Great. So you can actually determine which one you're in by going up to Review at the top left, going to About, and from here you can see which edition of Review you're in. I'm in Bluebeam Review 64 Extreme.
Now, I'm going to speak for Kyle Davis here. See that version number, that 20.2.30? That's such a handy piece of information to have. If you're ever having trouble with Review and you need to contact support, let them know, hey, I'm on Review, Bluebeam Review 64 Extreme version 20.2.30. That really helps support know which version you're on, because this software updates so frequently. Maybe you're on an old version and an update would simply fix it. That saves everybody's time. So always handy tip there. Go up to Review and then go to About. You can see your version. So Michael, you're there in Extreme. What other versions are there?
So there's Standard. Standard has pretty much all of the great features we've talked about today, except for the OCR. It does have overlay, except for you can't batch overlay, you can't batch slips sheet. Then you have CAD, which is the second one, which gives you the plugin capabilities. So if you were there in Forms the other day, we were talking about how I could batch print out folders from Outlook. That can only be done because I have the plugin capabilities from Review CAD or 3D PDFs. Now, there may be some folks in here that haven't seen a 3D PDF. Let's go in and open up my 3D PDFs desktop here. Boom. And see, this is why I just should have just navigated to my file access there, right? Because then I would have been in here already, wouldn't have had to go and navigate through all these. But let me open up a 3D PDF. It takes a little bit to render. This is a architectural document set that has a lot of metadata to it. So it has to itemize all of the elements for the 3D model tree. But it is not a model. It is seen as a .pdf extension.
This is super cool. I love showing these off.
And it's done. And yes, Revit shows trees as single items versus full 3D, but cool. Okay, so as we're in here, this is what we call a 3D PDF. Now I can go through and do a section box. I can select my section box here, and I can go more into and investigate what's happening in here. Again, you can select specific elements. This one was printed out from Revit design environment. And elements are specific families that are in component families that are in the design environment. And from here, I can go to my markups tree, and we talked a little bit about the 3D model tree. And this works like the markups list. And yes, it's in metric, sorry. But I can get all the data from it here as well.
All sorts of cool stuff. And something, we talked about this being a community for this morning coffee review. A few weeks ago, we were playing with 3D PDFs and we learned a new trick. So do you want to take one of those trees, those ugly trees from Revit and transform it?
Yes, that was this button, right?
Yep. There's actually a transform button where you can actually make changes to things in 3D PDF. So if you want to move that up or down, you can actually transform it. Your section model will keep that from getting cut.
Yep.
But very cool stuff there. How do you create a 3D model PDF was a question that came through. This is done in CAD or Extreme. If you have either one of those versions, you have the option to have plugins installed into Revit or Navisworks that would allow the creation of a 3D PDF. We talked all about this a couple weeks ago. Check the chat for a link to our YouTube channel. I think it was sometime in June when we talked about 3D PDFs, wasn't it?
It's somewhere.
So you don't have to go back far.
But I guess let me ask you a question, Jason. I'll play not knowing about 3D PDFs. Does this work? If I create a 3D PDF and I have review, what if I send it to someone that doesn't have review? Will they be able to see the 3D PDF?
I feel like this is a trick question, and I always think no, but the answer is yes, you can.
Yes, there you go. Yes, you can. You cannot view these though on a mobile device, unfortunately.
Correct.
Yet.
Doesn't work on the iPad version. Yeah. But that's also a good segue. Some of the things that you do in review are not viewable to those in other lesser forms of PDF software. So what would we have to do? Let's say you went back to that PDF file that you had open and you added those text boxes and those callouts. If you sent that to somebody in a lesser software, what's going to happen?
They would still see it.
They see the
Adobe,
markups?
right?
No.
No? They go away? They have to flatten it?
You have to flatten it first. So it's a good practice. I always thought that it didn't work. I don't have Adobe to test, and
Kyle,
I'm kind of thankful for that.
Let's ask Kyle. Kyle's here. Kyle, do I have to flatten my markups before I send it to an Adobe user? Because he has both.
Oh, this could be a good test. No, you don't. Yeah. Okay. So Sarah also chimed in. Thank you. It does work when sent to Adobe users. Hyperlinks will work in Adobe if they are flattened. Thanks for that, Doug. See?
And I do know
involvement. I love it.
Yep. I do know Sketch to Scale has issues and they do need to be flattened.
Right.
Because sometimes their sub-properties get populated when they are sent over to an Adobe. And that was a support question that was actually asked in the morning COT review. And then we took it offline through our support and we figured that out there. Well, Kyle Davis figured that out there.
And another comment here, you have to flatten to send to users on mobile devices. So if they are opening it up on Chrome or Safari and not an actual PDF software, they're probably going to have issues. And there are some other markups that are going to have issues. So the best practice is still just to flatten it because we don't know who's receiving it on the other side.
Yep.
You want to show that button real quick?
Yep. Document, and then you have flatten. I always recommend saving an extra one out that allows for markup recovery. But you can deselect this box, which means it is now becoming one with the PDF. And I always equate flattening to the iron on logos to shirts, right? I am ironing on that logo so it hopefully does not get washed off. But there's no hopefully getting washed off here because it's part of the PDF now.
And with that, it's not just about having somebody view the markups that we've made or the changes. It's also about protecting your markups, right? So this was a comment that came in. Protect your data. If someone wants to go in there and change your stuff, they can say, "Oh, look, hey, I got this PDF file from ATG and they spelled everything wrong." Well, if we flatten it, then they won't do it for us. So we can protect our content. So it's another way to do it that way.
Great. So let's also go back to talking a little bit about markups and how different markups work within review. You have also a revision cloud. Jason, you did a blog or a white paper on the line styles, right?
I did. I think it was a blog on line types. Yes.
Okay. So line types are easy to recreate, and Jason walked me through that because I didn't know how easy it was until I looked at his information about it. But you can change these. So maybe this wasn't a revision cloud and you just wanted to go through and manipulate it. Again, revision clouds are great. There are some settings that are also utilized when you are selecting a markup that's been placed. These outer ones are going to scale up or down. So they are the blue color icons. You can also rotate your markup with the top node indication here. Now the yellow node indications are actually modifying what's been placed. So you can go through and move ones that have been placed. You can even add a node by right clicking and you can say control points, add a control point, and then you can modify it even more if you wanted to. You also have this thing called a Cloud Plus. So instead of making a markup here or adding an arrow, you can already have a call out associated to it. Now, this is something that I saw a lot of users using at the beginning. And now not so many users use the callouts because metadata can now be associated to markups, and that's more efficient and less busy on the markups when you're putting a bunch on a PDF set. But here's a revision with a revision cloud already associated to it. A revision cloud with a comment. Sorry, I tongue twisted myself.
Oh, good question about grips from David. Grabbing the upper grip rotates around the center. Is there a way to rotate around a corner? I don't believe you can change the rotation point. Can you?
Yeah, it's just I don't know if there's a way to change the location point of origin to drag. I think it defaults to the center.
But we'll find out. This is why we love doing morning coffee review, because we get challenged with questions and sometimes we figure it out and sometimes we don't. That's the beauty of the community. Doug said you can hold down shift to move in lesser increments because by default it does, want to do lock to a certain thing. Another sidebar. There are some sort of snaps inside of here, right? You can bypass certain things with the shift or control keys. They're not consistent in my experience. So try them, different ones, you'll get different behavior.
Yes, and the scaling for them and changing them. And as they've been modified, again, a lot of clients are turning towards the comments here. Then you can see them in the markups list as they're being placed, exporting them out with a markup summary report versus busying up the screen with all the information. Kyle said earlier, some captures have an issue when you have a capture attached to them. So instead of going through and placing an image on a markup like this and open from disk, and one of these in here. Instead of doing this, you can actually attach the image to the markup. So you can go through and say, select the markup, right click, say capture from camera. Oops, that's that camera. Let me go through here, capture from file, open the file. I'll go to pictures here. I'll give you a good old cactus from our state. Boom. And when you click it, this is the icon of the capture that's attached to the markup.
So pretty cool behavior there that we can do. Super handy if you're doing punch walkthroughs and things like that. All right.
You also have the markup, the arc command, so you can go through and make an arc. You also have the ability to highlight, again, vector versus raster PDFs, right? So this is a vector, which is smoother lines, and I can go through and select it, or I can highlight over here. You also have the ability to go through and make a polygon or a polyline. Now, Review does have the ability to take live dimensions, so this needs to be scaled for you to do that. I have a log on that as well on how to set different scales for documents. But let's go through and just show a couple of these tools for all of us new users out here. I can go through and say measure, and now I can take accurate measurements on the document set itself. Again, this is that snap feature that Jason was talking about earlier. I can snap to content. And Jason, what am I doing to get this orthogonal positioning?
This is where those shift and control keys come into play. So it's shift or control. One of the two will constrain it.
Yeah, I'm holding shift down so I get a straight positioning as I place it. And one update, by the way, is sub elements. So you can change just this specific dimension of what it is to different length types. But this is an accurate dimension. You do have tools, markups, and dimension here, which is you telling it what you want it to be, right? So if you were saying, no, this is supposed to be 20 on the dot, right? You're telling it here, this is a live dimension.
So don't be the dimension person unless you're laying things out. We don't always want to draw to scale. That's the CAD, the years of CAD use. Please just draw things to scale. All right, we got a couple minutes left. Want to wrap up here. There's another question here from Isaac about the 3D PDF. With the 3D PDF, if changes are made the next day, will it basically sync the update, or do you have to create a new PDF file? So good question. There is no live link between those two. So if you're talking about making those changes in the 3D PDF, it's not syncing back to Revit. However, you can save your 3D PDF, and it will save those transformations and those sections. And then comment from David talking, should show the draw to scale tools if you have time. We just did a whole session on that like 2 weeks ago.
So you have the ability, you have the ability to sketch to scale items. So if you wanted to sketch to scale like a rectangle, this was great for like interior design. If you want to say, hey, I need, and not just interior design. Oh, come on, I should have hit tab. I was just using the example that I used last week, but you can go through and place by one click over of whatever sketch to scale, tab over to the correct size. That way, this is to scale in the document. You can get a more accurate visual of what you're going to place. And then Doug, another one, reply to markup. All right, so for all those new folks, you can actually make a comment like, hello world, great. Someone's gonna come through and reply to the comment, right? Because they say this is not the world, or go away. There is a reply to that. It doesn't overwrite the original comment of whatever it was, but down here in the markups lists, you will see the reply to the specific markup. As I click on it, it navigates to where it is in the markups list. I see the reply down here. It says go away. So you can have an accurate time log of things that are taking place, like, hey, Michael said hello world at 7:23. It is 7:29, and he said go away. And this is back to that user part that Jason was talking about at the beginning.
Absolutely. And you know, this session was all about back to basics, and there's still a whole bunch more we can cover. So maybe we'll continue this in next week's session. You can always pay attention to our LinkedIn. Usually, we didn't do it this week. Sorry, whoops. We do a preview video of what we're going to be talking about Otherwise, our ATG marketing team will send out, a message about what we're going to be talking about next week. But I feel like there's more to Markups list that we could probably cover in a whole session.
Yep. And
one more.
also,
Go ahead.
Are you going to finish with the review after so we can get a pulse on what everyone likes to hear from us?
No, but you can do that.
Okay. At the end, you will get a poll, so please fill it out. That it lets us know what you all want to hear about in our next series. So feel free to say anything you want about what you want to learn next time. Also, give us feedback. We like feedback. We can't do better unless we hear how we are doing. Otherwise, Jason and I are just going to think we're doing the best that we can ever do, and we'll keep going forward. But please give us some reviews so we know how we're doing, get a pulse, and I'll let Jason wrap it up from here.
Yep. All right. So one last comment from Kyle about something that we talked about, the defaults. So he made that Cloud Plus. Why is it red? I don't want to see red. I want to see blue. How do I make it default to blue? This will be our last tip, and then we'll wrap up.
Just the cloud or the line too?
Anything you okay. want. If you go to the properties, so the gear icon panel, or that, yeah, inside the properties, or right-clicking right there, set as default. You have that ability to set as default. So if he were to click on set to default, the next time he does a Cloud Plus, it's going to be a blue box with a blue call out and red text. So I have those options there.
Yeah, and I prefer not to do that because if you're going to utilize the same markup in the same color orientation, let the default be the default. It should be done in the tool set saved as the type of markup you want to make, like this cloud, because this is blue now, with some other things I put in it, right?
Yeah, this is exciting. I feel like we're almost not really starting over, but doing more in depth in the stuff that really helps people get used to using review. And I hope that everybody who attended today, I recognize a lot of names here. Thanks for coming back and watching our live podcast thing that we've got going on here. Hopefully you learned something today too, even though we were talking about basics. So with that, we're over on time. Thank you all for coming. We'll see you next week at Tuesday, 8:30 Central. Have a great vacation, David. But we'll see everybody else next Tuesday at 8:30. And of course, out there on YouTube land, thanks for tuning in. And even if you're watching it in the future.
Yep. Thanks, everyone. We look forward to seeing you next week.